Hi, I'm Tony and News. We are back onto the Ballymena Fraud case. DWP and the fake debt of £7,390. So, I'm going to tell you the full story now. This is going to be long and I apologise, but DWP complaints team have just done the biggest shark attack on the victim. They have taken so many bites out of this woman. Spielberg would be so proud. Right, the long story, probably the fuller story. I don't want to confuse you with all the legalities of this, but I think I have to now. Right, so 5 years ago, 2019, we went to a friend's house and we came to the conclusion that we had to take the lady of the house to the police station. Domestic violence, serious stuff, and the gentleman of the house was removed and was eventually prosecuted of controlling coercive behaviour, right? So this is serious stuff. This is deadly serious stuff. Now she was a foreign national on a spouse's visa, unable to claim benefits. So we're talking about end of March 2019. Police take all the information and domestic violence officers apply for leave to remain outside the rules domestic violence concession. And the Home Office grant that, and they send a letter saying you have passed a habitat residence test from this date for 3 months, and you have to apply within those 3 months for leave to remain. Right, now she's working, she's paying tax, national insurance, all right, but there's not enough money to pay the rent, etc. So we paid the rent, we paid the deposit, we sorted things out with the landlord, guarantor and all of that. Children go to school, etc. They both have British citizenship. So things are getting back on keel. 3 years later, she's still working, earning a bit more money, etc. But she's at work and gets a phone call from DWP investigators. And she just answers their questions innocently as, you know, what's the date on your ID card? What's the date on your, you know, what happened? Where's your husband? All of that stuff, right? Next thing she knows, 2 letters arrive in the same post. You have failed the habitat residence test and you have passed the habitat residence test. So somebody has been in and messed about on the computer. About 3 days later, another letter comes from DWP Debt Recovery. You owe £7,390, right? Now, what they've done, it wasn't clear on these 2 letters, but they had moved the date that she was eligible for benefits by about 8 months, generating this debt. Then they had transmitted this debt from DWP Fraud to DWP Debt Recovery. And they started collecting they started collecting £81 a month from her benefits, right? So we escalated this to a mandatory reconsideration 5 days later. So it took 5 days and it was Easter weekend. And we made the case fairly simply, actually. It was into like 3 paragraphs. Basically, that she didn't owe the money, that she had leave to remain from this date and passed the habitat residence test. Here was a Home Office letter, and that we put the second paragraph in there that she had 3 months to apply for leave to remain, and that the status continues whilst the Home Office make their decision. All right. And that was in the very first letter, half a page long, with all the evidence. Anyway, they kept taking £83 a month, and they went to £82 a month. Then they went up to 93. Excuse me. So the mandatory reconsideration just sat in the system for a year, right? And about 3 days before, which was Easter Saturday the year later, somebody rejects the mandatory reconsideration, despite the fact we submitted all the evidence. They sort of half admit that some of it should have been paid, but they said that the amount we owed, or she owed, was £5,003 now. But they failed to tell DWP Debt Recovery. They got the law wrong anyway, that's another story. So we put in for a tribunal. So we put the tribunal in, and we put all the evidence in, again, with much more paperwork. And we also had a letter from the Home Office backing up their previous letter. That wasn't actually heard. So this case started in April 2022. This wasn't actually, we sent that in October 2023. So 1 month later, DWP hadn't replied. They have to reply within a month. We waited another month, and then we raised it to the judge for direction. Judge wrote to DWP, and DWP just wrote back saying, "You've won. We put up the white flag. You're right. Speak to your job coach." There was nothing about repaying the £1,518 that were being repaid. So, excuse me, got an itch. Right. Right. So we put in a complaint with a request for the money back immediately, and also for the amount of time and effort that we spent fighting this case and evidence we provided, the loss of interest, the fact that they've, what else we have? The whole case was just based around nationality, right? She'd been made homeless in that time because she hadn't got enough money to pay the rent rise that came along. Rent went from £895 to £1,200. She negotiated a cheaper rent with the landlord, and then 8 months after she negotiated a cheaper rent, he sent her eviction notice, right? And although the rent rates in the area basically gone through the roof to £1,300 a month. And that's sort of, I've checked the whole market area, as I've seen in another video. There is nothing less than £1,300 a month. You know, it's shocking. Anyway, another story, we will leave that point aside. Then she'd been to her mother's funeral, and her father passed away, and she just did not have enough money to move house and go to her father's funeral because of the debt that was on her. And it's not just the amount, she had to pay more deposit because the rent was much more. She had to find the rent, she had to find the removal costs, she had to buy a fridge, buy a washing machine, right? Both of those were second hand. So DWP have written back to the complaint. First of all, they ignored the complaint for a few months. We escalated to the DWP legal team with a letter before action, right? And not until they got a letter before action did they reply. Anyway, so finally got a reply from DWP complaints team, and they've just done a full shark attack, right? So the first bite was that they claimed that she claimed benefits from 2017, I think it was. She hadn't claimed benefits. Her husband had claimed benefits for himself and the children. He made a mistake, but they put the debt onto both of them. All right. So to do that, they had to add her to the claim, even though she wasn't eligible for benefits at that point, right? We didn't make a claim for her. She has never made a claim until the 1st of April 2019, right? When she had the letter in her hand from the Home Office. But they're making false allegations on that. They trying to get me thread here. They said she had had extended holidays of 2 to 4 weeks. Well, firstly, she wasn't claiming benefits at the time she had a holiday. The holiday was to go and visit her mum and her dad, who were getting elderly. And it was for 15 days. Now, anyone who Googles it, you can go on holiday for a month without telling DWP, right? I don't know where they're making up rules to make you wrong that don't actually exist, all right? They claim that she had had multiple changes of immigration status without telling them. They sort of ignore the fact that we had gone to the job centre with the letter, with her change of immigration status on April the 5th, 2019, and presented it to them. They took it away, scanned it, whatever. But according to that, so then they think that there was a change of immigration status when the 3 months ended and the Home Office made a decision. Now, they just don't understand how the system works. So the system works, you go to a solicitor, you hand all your paperwork over, it gets sent off to the Home Office. You don't apply for that extension just happens, right? The fact that you had 3 months to apply for a change in status, the fact that the Home Office took 8 months to decide it, you don't apply for that. That just happens legally. But anyway, so the way they've written this, they just kept repeating the fact through the letter, something like 13 times, that you broke this rule, you broke that rule. She hasn't broken any rules, right? This was a shark attack by somebody in the DWP trying to cover up all of their errors, right? Now, these errors that are happening in the Department of Work and Pensions, right? Rule number 1 is the Secretary of State must have suitably trained staff and experience to do so, right? DMG, Decision Makers Guide, 010001. Rule 1 of the book, right? Rule 3, Rule 01003, you must follow the Decision Makers Guide. You're going to get a copy of this Decision Makers Guide. It's brilliant, right? It's fabulous reading. Rule 6, DMG 01006, you must follow any laws, right? Now, this leave to remain outside the rules is actually within the rules, right? Because it's covered by the 1971 Immigration Act, which they quoted on their letter. We've considered all the laws, blah, 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 including the Immigration Act, right? In all their letters, that the Secretary of State may order and may make further provision giving or refusing or varying any leave to remain in the United Kingdom. And then rule also says that this is where the continuation of leave pending variation decision. So basically, one section says the Secretary of State can allow you to be in the country, and the Secretary of State pending a decision that your status continues. All right. Anyway, Now, also, if you go back, a habitat residence test, which is 150 pages long, don't get me wrong, it's a lovely document. But if you Google domestic violence concession and the decision maker's guide, it comes up straight away with the answer. If I can do it, I'm a dumb old telephone engineer, right? So I Googled it and it comes up with 2 lines, DMG 073181. Basically means it explains the domestic violence concession to decision makers, right? And then DMG 073183 says that when the Home Office are considering your leave to remain, that your status stays the same, right? So it's all in the rule book. It's all in Decision Maker's Guide. They have failed. So firstly, they have created a debt, right? And Section 2 of the Fraud Act, right? That you cannot make up a false debt, right? And then they have transmitted that debt to another group. And they have taken 18 payments from that, 18 counts of fraud by Section 2 of the Fraud Act, fraud by misrepresentation, right? Now, the other part of this is that they have failed to do their job and caused great harm to somebody. So that comes under misconduct in public office. They knew, they had the information, they should have known that they were breaking the rules. That they had the information about this lady, but they refused to consider it. So when you send in your appeal, they just go back to the information from the previous phone call. They don't consider the paperwork you sent in until a year later when they do mandatory reconsideration. Now, the law doesn't work like that. You can have your rules in Department of Work and Pensions, but they're not stronger than the laws of the land. All right. So, anyway, all I can say is the way they wrote this letter, there was 10 pages of character assassination to try and justify their bad decisions. So all I can say is that sadly, they won't even amend their decision. I have been on the phone to them twice. I have told them what's wrong. They will not go back on their decision. They won't amend one word of it, even when they know they're wrong. So they told me that my only option is to go to independent case examiner. That's probably another 1 year wait. So this goes wrong in 2019. She has paid benefits in 2019. They investigate her in 2022. I put mandatory reconsideration in 5 days, but they don't look at that for a year until April 2023. I then put in for a tribunal. They don't answer that on time, right? We put in a complaint. They finally answer that 4 months late. Now, I have to now put in a independent case examiner case, which will be looked in another year. So this case will not conclude, by my estimations, until 2025. It is absolutely shocking, but this is misconduct in public office. You can't fight a case because you have to get your head around all of this and get your head around it, put your paperwork in, park it for a year, and then when a year comes up and you get the reply, you've got to go back all through to get it all back in your head. Anyway, this is going way too long, 20 minutes long. That's the update on the Ballymena Fraud case. If you haven't ever looked up the Decision Maker's Guide, if you've got a dispute with them, you probably need to have a look. The other thing you might well consider is subject access requests. Get a subject access request of all the information and communications with them. That's probably another one of my little tactics that I will enjoy, giving them some grief. Anyway, I'm going full Anna Bates on them with this. They are not going to get away with this. I will go to the High Court and challenge the decision, whatever they do, because everything they have done is wrong. So anyway, I'm Tony, Ant News, and I'll give you an update if and when I ever get the next update. Over and out.